This is Peter Dutton, the opposition leader. Let's listen in.
And others in the government, they've been able to bring to fruition this plan that's been long in the making. And it's necessary given the circumstances in the Indo-Pacific, which the Prime Minister and Richard Marles have pointed out, Prime Minister Sunak, President Biden and others. We live in a very difficult time, and we should be very honest with the Australian people about that, and that's necessitated this deal, and there will be many other elements to AUKUS that will be announced over the next couple of years, aside from the submarines, as you know, particularly around hypersonics and guided weapons in space and other investments that will be needed as part of the AUKUS compact. I want to congratulate a number of people, starting, of course, with Jonathan Mead. Jonathan Mead worked incredibly hard for this outcome. From day one, he was involved, and I had an excellent working relationship with him, and I know that Richard does as well. Also to Kurt Campbell and to Jake Sullivan on the US side. This deal wouldn't have been possible without their input at a White House level. Obviously, Lloyd Austin at the Pentagon and Ben Wallace in the United Kingdom. These are all great friends of Australia and of this relationship that is more important than ever. We have to make sure that there is transparency and honesty with the Australian people about the cost involved in AUKUS. It's not credible for the government to say that there's no net impact, even over the forward estimates. We can't allow Labor to cannibalise the Defence Force to pay for AUKUS. It's not an either-or option. Let's be very clear, when Labor was last in government, they reduced spending by 10.5% in real terms, which brought the spending in defence down to just over 1.5% of GDP. Now, we built that up from the day that we were elected to come in at 2% or just over 2%, and that put us in a credible position to do this deal with the United States and the United Kingdom. There's no way in the world, if you were spending $10 billion a year less in defence, that the United States or the UK would have seen us as credible partners in the construction or the commitment to the delivery of the nuclear-powered submarines. That's very clear. And we can't allow Labor to go back to a circumstance where they're going to cannibalise Army or Navy or Air Force to pay for this. And so there is an honest conversation that the government has to have. There's no magic pudding. There's no way in which you can sugarcoat it. There is extra money that needs to be spent in defence, and the United Kingdom has been honest about this, as you saw with Prime Minister Sunak's announcement to increase their spending to 2.5% of GDP. So that is incredibly important, and that will be there'll be a lot of detail that I think you'll require from the government in the run-up to the May budget, and not just the forward estimates, but into the out years as well. I think that is a very important part of this conversation. There's obviously a very significant industrial capability that's built up across the three countries, but importantly in South Australia and Western Australia. That is a continuation again of what we had put in place under the original AUKUS negotiations, and we're very happy to support the build-up, which, as the Americans described to us, was part of that nuclear stewardship. You needed to develop and to demonstrate the ability to build the submarines, to contribute to the maintenance, to the in-service upgrades and all of that, which is continuing. There is obviously a very significant question mark hanging over the government's commitment to the East Coast base, and the Deputy Prime Minister has been clear about that this morning. I suspect what's happening here is that they're delaying an announcement on that until after the New South Wales state election. I think the Labor Party, frankly, at the moment is talking out of both sides of their mouth in relation to the East Coast base, and they might see that as a savings. Why wouldn't they commit to it when they've committed to WA and to South Australia? Because that was an important part of the original considerations. And it was also an important part of trying to attract a workforce on the East Coast so that, and this was the advice, clear advice from Navy at the time, that not, I mean, most people want to live in WA, but not everybody wants to live on the West Coast. And the idea of increasing the workforce without a base on the East Coast from a Navy advice perspective was difficult. So it was to augment the workforce in the West and to attract people into being a submariner, which is obviously an incredibly important part of delivering in the AUKUS program.